family. Welcome to Thursday night's devotion. I'd like to draw your attention to a story that you probably heard when you were in Sunday school many years ago, and it's the story of King David. King David has a friend. His friend's name is Uriah, and they've been together. They've been, buds for a while, but it's time for the kings to go out to war, and for some reason, David sends his army out, but David stays home. He's not quarantined. He stayed home by choice. And while he's home where he's not supposed to be, he spies, or he notices as he's up on his roof, he notices something that doesn't belong to him. I'm going to keep this child friendly since we happen to have children here, but you know the story. He sees something that doesn't belong to him, and he decides he wants it. So he sends his servant, says, I want that, go get that for me. And the servant says, that's not for you. You know that's off limits. That belongs to somebody else. But King David is king, and he can have what he wants, and he doesn't care that it belongs to somebody else. And he says, you go bring it to me. So he oversteps some boundaries here, and he had a warning, but he overstepped the boundaries anyway. And because King David oversteps these boundaries, there's some consequences that arise. And when the consequences arrives, the he's like, he doesn't really want people to know what he's done. He doesn't want to make this thing right. He wants to hide his sin. He wants to, make it go away. So he tries to make it look like that, it's not a problem. And Uriah doesn't go along with this plan, and so he has his own friend killed to cover up his sin. And that's a terrible thing. Not just to, and it's not a mistake, he willfully chooses this sin. But he chooses a sin, and then when he can't cover it up the way he wants to, he's willing to take somebody's life to cover up his sin. And he does. He actually hands a note to his friend Uriah and says, take this back to the commander of the battle. And when the commander reads the note says, hey, the next time y'all are in the heat of battle, pull everybody back and leave Uriah by himself, and let the enemy kill him. And he trusts Uriah enough to know that Uriah's not going to read that note. He put his death sentence in his own hand and sends it back. And that's exactly what happens. Uriah is killed. So if we fast forward through the story, David thinks he's fine. He got what he wanted. He covered up what he did, and he thinks he's okay until the prophet shows up. And the prophet says, I need to talk to you. And so David, sits down with the prophet, and the prophet tells him a story. And he tells him a story about a pet. I don't know if you've ever had a pet that you loved, but if you've ever loved an animal, if you've ever loved a pet, one of God's beautiful creatures that has been very dear to you, you might understand why this struck such a chord in David's heart, this story. And he chooses, interestingly enough, he doesn't talk to David about a king, though David's a king. He doesn't talk to him about a warrior, although David has been that. He doesn't talk to him about being, involved in political intrigue or diplomacy or any of the very powerful roles that David has had. No, he goes all the way back to when David was young. His first job, and that was of shepherd. And he tells him about a man who's a very poor man who has one lamb. And this is not a farm meat animal for this man. It's his very dear pet. He loves this little lamb. He feeds it from his, he hand feeds the lamb. He lets it drink out of his own cup. It lays beside him. he loves this pet. But his neighbor is a very wealthy man, and one day the wealthy neighbor has a visitor, and he decides to feed the visitor lamb chops. And he takes the poor man's lamb. He kidnaps and steals the poor man's lamb, something that did not belong to him. He takes it and he slaughters it to feed the appetite of the visitor. And David is furious, as you can imagine. David is. He's red hot mad. And he's so angry that he says, that man will die. And he has a right to say it because he's the king, and the king gets what the king wants. And he's mad. And he's blind. He was blind to the fact that what he wanted in the first place didn't belong to him. Blind by what he wanted. And he's blind again by anger this time. And he has no sympathy. Isn't that the way we humans tend to be? When I look at somebody else's sin, oh man, fire and brimstone. And don't even see my own. Can't see the plank in my eye, but boy, I can see the speck in somebody else's. And David is blinded not just to his own lust and desire for what he wanted, but he's blind to his own sin. And he passes the death sentence on another man over a lamb when he has killed his own friend. We can be so blind, we humans. We can see so quickly the wrong in others and not see it in ourselves. And so the prophet did what God's spokesperson does, is he says, it's you. It's you. You're the one. And David is dumbstruck, of course. He has been smacked right between the eyes with the truth. And let me tell you, getting smacked right between the eyes with truth hurts. It's painful. But pain of that sort is our friend. And David does what we should all do when we are gobsmacked in the face with truth, is stop trying to cover it up. Stop trying to pretend that it doesn't matter. Stop trying to push the blame off on somebody else. Stop trying to kill to get our own way. Now, David, he acknowledges his sin and falls on his face in repentance. And I tell you that story today because we all get to be in David's shoes at some time or another. It's so easy for us when we hear a story or read a story to see ourselves as the protagonist, never the antagonist. We rarely see ourselves as the bully, always the victim. We rarely see ourselves as the hurter. We're always the hurtee. But when faced with the word from the prophet, David sets a good example for every sinner, and surely we have all found ourselves there. David sets a good example for the first time in that story, and that he says, I'm guilty. It's me. In these next few whiles, it looks like we're going to have another 4-ish weeks together. Can I tell you that nobody knows what's going on with you like the people closest to you? David had to send a servant to go do his bidding to bring Bathsheba to him. That servant knew what was going on wasn't right. And he also had to give word to the head of the commander of the battle, and that commander knew that this isn't right. Can I tell you that the people that you're living with in your house right now, they know. They may not know everything, but they know when you're not right. And they know when you could be doing better. And the best thing that any of us can do over the next few while we are together is to make things right at home. Make it right. Make it right with your companion. Make it right with your kids. Make it right with your grandchildren. You got a brother, sister, cousin, ex-wife. You got somebody that you've done wrong. I guarantee you we've all got somebody we could send a letter to, send a card to, call on the phone. Somebody that we could say, you know what, I really messed up. I really did. I crossed boundaries. And I am so sorry. Will you forgive me? Now, I'm not going to tell you that they are going to forgive you. But if you will do what is right, if you will confess what you've done wrong, then there can be hope for the end of your story, like there was hope at the end of David's story. David's story doesn't end with David the murderer. His story doesn't end with David, the guy who crossed God's law. By the time the story, now there was some pretty rough stuff that grew out of this. There's no doubt. It's not all sunshine and roses for David. But David was able to get his heart right. He was able to make amends for the rest of his days. And I know this is really heavy, and I will tell you, I recorded this time number 5. I recorded it 5 times because I just couldn't get through it, thinking this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel. This are not things I want to say, but I can't get away from the feeling that this is what somebody needs to hear. So whoever we all are, and I'll tell you, I'm guilty. I have to repent to my family a lot. We don't have to let our story end with our wrong. We don't have to let our story end with the things that we've done that we wish we could have a do-over. It doesn't have to be the end of a story. It can be a chapter in the story. It was a chapter in David's life. It was a dark and low one, and it did leave threads throughout the rest of his time, throughout his days. There is no doubt about that. But David was able, down the road, after some healing, after some repenting, after some serious come to Jehovah meetings, David is listed in the lineage of Jesus Christ. God didn't throw him out because of what he'd done. And God won't throw you out either. No one can knock you out but yourself. So today, tonight, 10 years, I don't know, whenever this reaches the folks it needs to reach, please know this. God is not finished with you. And you don't have to be finished with him. If there's anything that we could do for you, if you could reach out to the church. Your brothers and sisters, they love you, and they want you to come home. They want you to be part of our family. And we care about each and every one of you deeply. The Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine on you again.